You're listening to Fighting Back, news talk, current events, and political commentary. Now here's the host of Fighting Back, Uncle Ronnie.
And here we are, and welcome back. Wow, we got a wide screen here now. We've got Alexander Kolodin, and he is the Republican Party attorney. And welcome to the show. And of course, we have Senator Eddie Farnsworth, Mr. Ray Michaels, Mike Ray. At any rate, welcome back to the show. Can you pull up a little closer here so we can get you in here? This guy grows a beard about every 30 seconds, I think. I've seen him after he's shaved, and he looks like...
I get my 5 o'clock shadow at 2 o'clock.
There you go. Well, at any rate, what we've been talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is the simple fact that the Maricopa County judicial, one of the judges, Thomason, I believe is his name, yes. And he has been kind enough to finally agree that the Arizona State Senate has supremacy over the election. That's a good thing. And we've got a lot of things that we've discussed during the last hour, especially we've certified that this machine adds up properly. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, right. Very nice.
So we did a complete audit of the machine, and it does work.
We even opened it up.
Yeah, we've done a forensic audit on that little calculator. So at any rate, we've talked a little bit about that. I want to talk about that. I would also like to talk to you about, there's been a couple of cases just recently with the United States Supreme Court, that one that was the Arizona GOP won, and then today I saw that the Powell case was also dropped without comment by the Supreme Court. So let's start in, first of all, with what's going on in Maricopa County. And from your perspective, Alexander, I think we got a win there. Still a long way to go, but this looks promising.
It looks promising. You know, when the language of the ruling came out, I was a little bit concerned that the county would continue to drag its feet, because the court still made it clear that it's up to the legislature to actually enforce the ruling, and the court's not going to do it for the legislature. But so far, it seems as if that won't be the case. Of course, the county has a history of backtracking on promises like that, so we'll keep our fingers crossed until everything's safely in the Senate's possession.
Yeah, now, you and I talked a little bit about that, and I was of the opinion that perhaps this time we didn't need a Senate vote if they balk at this, but you had indicated me other than that. Could you explain that?
Well, sure. So what the court did is essentially issue what's called an advisory opinion. And advisory opinions are fairly rare because courts typically will only adjudicate cases that are sort of live and in controversy. But everybody seemed to agree, all the parties seemed to agree, you know, it would be very helpful for us if the court would explain whether it is indeed legal for the legislature to comply with it, or for the county to comply with this audit and give the Senate the materials that they've subpoenaed. So the court, in its advisory opinion, says, you know, we've examined the legal arguments of each side, and the court's legal opinion is that it's perfectly kosher to comply with this subpoena. However, you know, the court's not going to enforce that ruling, right? We're just telling everybody what the law is.
Okay, so what's your best guess? Are they going to actually turn this over? Are they backtracking? I know they've made a few comments today. We discussed that with Senator Farnsworth and questioning, you know, why they haven't just come out with a mea culpa and said, okay, we were wrong, let's move forward. But are they going to fight this?
Well, what happened last time around is the Senate and the county were close to a deal because, of course, the county had temporarily succeeded in pulling the wool over the Senate's eyes and convincing them that there is such a thing as an Elections Assistance Commission certified auditor. When it was revealed that no such thing exists, of course, the Senate then decided they were going to use real forensic auditors, and that's when the county backtracked. So I wonder if the Senate, you know, selects another real auditor, if that ever got to the county, whether they would backtrack again. I think that bears watching.
Well, we pretty much determined, and a good friend of mine used the term sham audit. You know him well. And we kind of felt that this might have been a sham audit. If you want to know who that was, this was my friend right here. He's the one who coined the sham audit.
So, Alex, in your professional opinion, at what point does the court, let's just say that they do the whole thing that they've done in the past, which we think may happen again, at what point does the court just say, you know what, enough is enough. You're wasting the court's time. This is my ruling. I've given it to you. We've said it to you 3 different ways. Now, and they start putting some pressure on them from a court standpoint?
Well, I think the Senate would probably have to go back to court and actually bring an enforcement action if they wanted the court to do it. But look, the courts are really, really reluctant to do what they see as the Senate's dirty work for them, right? The court wants the Senate to shoot its own dog, so to speak. Whether if the enforcement was specifically brought before them again now that they've issued this advisory opinion, whether the court would indeed enforce, that's anybody's guess. But I think the pressure should be kept up on the Senate, and especially Senator Boyer, to say, look, you were questioning the legality. Now the legality is crystal clear. Now they're defining what is inarguably a legal order. Do we get contempt now?
So, Senator Farnsworth, do you believe that the Senate as a whole has the fortitude to go ahead and to really put their foot down this time, hearing from the court? Are they in a position to really do something and maybe make some arrests if that is what comes to it?
I think the weak link there is Paul Boyer, Senator Paul Boyer. He's the one that voted against it. So all 16 of for those who don't know, the Senate is split right now 16-14, 16 Republicans, 14 Democrats. So it takes every single Republican in the Senate to vote for something to get it to pass. All 16 had signed a paper saying that they would support a declaration of contempt, which is what is required by state statute before the Senate president is empowered to then use that enforcement mechanism. And I will clarify in just a second. So that's really the question, because Paul Boyer, after he signed that, decided on the floor that he wasn't going to vote for it, and so it died in a split 15-15. So the declaration never happened. Now, what I do think is that this would be much more difficult to vote against, because you have a court that has come out with this opinion. So I think it would be very tough. I know he got a lot of backlash. I do think the Senate has the fortitude, with possibly the exception of Paul Boyer. I do want to, and Alex, I want to ask you if you see it this way. I believe part of the problem that the county has, if they were to backtrack at this point, is much different than what they had before when they backtracked. There was no judgment, no ruling, no opinion by the court, and so it was still up in the air really what existed or how the court felt. But the court did not rule in favor of the county on a single issue. And so the county has a real difficult time now trying to justify having such a lopsided opinion given against them, to now backtrack and say, wait a minute, we don't believe that Judge Thomason really knew what he was doing. We're going to do what we want, and believe that they're going to win in any kind of an action that occurs. Do you see it that way?
So not entirely, only because I am a guy who's been litigated against the county for the better part of a year now, and I have seen them switch positions so many times at this point, and switch justifications so many times at this point. To see them doing it again would not be surprising. If I imagine that there's a distinct possibility that the next thing out of their mouth is, well, the court talked about the legality, but there's also a political question here, which is, whether the Senate really wants this, right? And if they do, they'll enforce their subpoena. And if they don't, we don't have to comply, right? You could easily see them making that argument at this point. I hope they don't. I hope you're right. I hope I'm wrong. But
well,
yeah.
We found somebody who's more skeptical of the county than I am. That's remarkable.
I hate those guys.
But the other thing is, Alex, that the court continues to talk about the legislative authority and the enforcement mechanism.
Sure.
But the Senate does not have the same breadth of enforcement that the courts do. Basically, there's no way to compel, under the current statutes, there's no way to compel somebody directly to give up these documents or information. What the statute allows is for the president, after a declaration of contempt by the Senate, which we just talked about failed, but even if that passed, the Senate president would be empowered to send the sergeant at arms, and I assume some of the Capitol Police, to go out and arrest people. But they don't have the authority to go out and start taking into custody ballots, et cetera.
Right. So this is the way that civil contempt works, right? The distinction between civil contempt, which is what you're talking about the Senate president doing, and criminal contempt, is that in civil contempt, the person who is arrested and imprisoned for contempt holds the keys to their freedom in their own pocket, right? And so the actual way that the compulsion works is you have now been arrested by the Senate for failing to comply with a subpoena. You will stay in jail or stay in custody until such time as the county complies. So in theory, they could just sit in jail forever and then comply, but I don't think they're going to do that, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's that. But the point is that the courts continue to talk about the Senate having its own remedy, and it does, but it's not as broad and it's not as forceful as having a remedy through the court. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Senate shouldn't enforce it. I think they should. I've been a strong advocate for that. But I don't think it's not apples and oranges when you're talking about civil contempt versus criminal contempt. And yet the court continues to say, we don't want to get involved because the Senate can do it themselves. Well, they can hopefully get there, but they can't send the marshals out to gather up all the information so that they can audit.
Well, I want to add one thing on that point, right, is as conservatives, we always say we play by the Marquis of Queensberry rules, and our opponents tend not to do so, right? Look, if the court has demonstrated one thing, it's that it is extremely reluctant to second guess the political branches of government, right? If Senator Fan were to tell the sergeant at arms, we have this contempt vote, go seize the machines, it's hard for me to imagine that a court would second guess that decision or her interpretation of what the contempt power allows. And I would hope that the legislature would realize that it's high time to use the court's deference to their own interpretation of their own rules to their advantage instead of letting that deference be used against it.
And I think that's fair. I agree with that.
You know, we just witnessed something that happened with the John Brakey case with the Libertarians, and that is where they had their hearing, and the county attorneys were at least 15 to 20 minutes late, and then once they got there, they apologized that they didn't know they had a hearing that day, and the judge did not reprimand them. I found that, if that had been you as a private attorney, I'm sure you would have been severely reprimanded.
It's quite.
So you didn't even want to think about that one.
Yeah. I remember the one time that ever happened. One of my cases, it was a private case, and opposing counsel, failed to show up. He didn't know it was the same day. So the judge turns to me and he goes, "Well, counselor, should I sanction opposing counsel for this?" Asking me the question. I'm like, "Hey, look, it's a small legal community. I go to the judge. Judge, we all make mistakes. We're not asking for a sanction." The judge turns to opposing counsel and goes, "I'm going to sanction you anyway."
At any rate, I was kind of surprised. I don't think the judge even said anything other than grant them more time, because he said we weren't ready. And the Libertarians' attorney said, "Well, how about having a response to tomorrow?" And the judge said, "Well, that's not enough time." They'd already had a week's notice, and they had it on 5 counts from you guys, from the Republican Party, 5 from the Libertarian Party. They had 10 notices, service, and they forgot. They didn't know it was happening.
Now, Alex, as the AZGOP attorney, you are a friend of the court on that case as well.
Yes.
Can you give us some updates on that?
So the last week, the court granted us leave to file our amicus brief in the Libertarian Party case you're talking about. Yeah, and is going to consider it. So we'll see what impact that has on their judgment.
When's the next hearing on that?
It's this week.
This week.
Sorry. Actually, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at my calendar.
Okay.
So.
At any rate, isn't it true that they already completed this audit, and did not allow the Republicans, the Libertarians, or the Democrats, and instead chose the League of Women Voters? Come on. I mean,
Right. Well, that was certainly the argument we advanced in our brief is, they said, well, because of COVID, we've got space restrictions. And of course, the AZ GOP's point was, well, we know you got space for 14 people because you had invited 14 people to come. But the statute actually doesn't require you to have 14 people there. The statute requires you to have one observer from each party there. So if it's a space constraint, bump somebody else because the statute doesn't let you bump us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, with a political-centric system here, I found it rather strange that they would select the League of Women Voters rather than the political parties. Isn't that rather strange?
It's extremely strange. What it is, as we pointed out to the court, is another instance where the county is trying to select their own judges, right? Yeah. They try to select their own judges, saying, oh, we don't like the Senate's auditor, so we're not giving you the ballots. We're going to have our hand-picked auditors to do the audit to judge us, right? And that's not enough for them. Then they say, well, and we want our hand-picked observers to observe our hand-picked auditors to judge us. Because they know the Arizona Republic's not going to question it. That's
Right.
what they know.
Right.
Oh, boy. Listen, let's shift gears a little bit. Where there's a couple of cases. Of course, the GOP case was dismissed from the federal courts, Supreme Court. Today, your former client or boss or the Kraken, Sidney Powell's
That's
case
right.
was dismissed without comment, I might add.
Yes, that's right.
And what's that about, without comment?
Well, that's actually a common way of denying petitions for review, or in our case, an emergency petition. It's actually not that strange. As Justice Thomas had put it with respect to some prior denials, however, this continued silence from the Supreme Court is itself now having the impact of undermining public confidence in the election. The refusal to weigh in and establish the law once and for all is actually starting to impair the judicial system's ability to bolster public confidence in and the legitimacy of the entire system.
And also their argument of there's no standing.
Ridiculous.
Maybe you can go into a little bit of that. I don't know how they can justify that a state versus a state and they don't have standing.
Right. And I think two members of the Supreme Court pointed out that under the Constitution, this is actually mandatory standing. So in a lot of situations, even if they're standing, not standing, Supreme Court gets to pick what cases it's going to review. But with respect to state versus state, at least it's the opinion of a few judges.
Last resort, isn't it?
That's the court of first instance in state versus state.
Right.
And under the Constitution, my opinion is, it's shared by two justices, they not only have standing, but the Supreme Court has to hear that case.
That
They
would
didn't do
appear
it.
correct.
They didn't do it.
I mean, what other court can?
No other
The
court
Texas
can.
court or the
So
the Pennsylvania court? It has to be the.
I know
neutral
both
third
Senator,
party.
you and Alex are both attorneys, and from my understanding of the Constitution is that you stay as a Supreme Court judge for good behavior. It's not a lifetime appointment. It actually
Sure.
says for good behavior.
I believe they can be impeached.
Could the Congress say this? You did not follow the Constitution. This is bad behavior. You will be removed. You will be removed, and just bring in some other people. I think that's possible.
Well, I guess it's
Probable, maybe not, but possible.
You're in the
Yeah,
realm of
it's-
technical possibility.
It's
but-
theoretical, but it's never
Yeah, I
going
don't
to
see
happen.
it happening.
But the answer is yes. I mean, the Congress has given up all kinds of authority that it has, as has the legislature.
Yes, absolutely.
No, I believe there's still two more cases to be adjudicated, and I believe the opinions are going to come out tomorrow. I believe one of them, and you can help me, gentlemen, if you would. One of them is about ballot harvesting. Where are we at on that? I believe that's going to come out tomorrow. The decision. What's your thoughts?
I guess that's a really broad question. You're talking about the Berdovich case, right?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I went to an interesting talk maybe 2 years ago by a law professor at the University of San Diego, brought a bunch of conservative lawyers from all over the country to talk about the EEOC, right, and the EEOC regulations on private business. And her sort of general thesis that she was developing, which I thought was very poignant and applicable to this case, is she said, there is no hiring principle that a company can apply that is in any way related to the ability to do the job that does not also have a disparate impact on some group or other, right? Even if a company were to say, we only want right-handed people, you're now discriminating against Asian Americans who have slightly higher propensity to be left-handed, right? The standard that Brnovich is trying to avoid having applied to states' election integrity legislation, right, is that EEOC standard where everything it has some sort of disparate impact, and therefore all election integrity legislation is therefore illegal. I think on the law, it's a very solid argument. Obviously, when you get up, especially when you get up to the level of the Supreme Court, the question of the judge's politics does come into play.
Interesting.
Then there should be another case. Did you have a comment on that? I mean, Arizona has a law now. I don't believe it's being enforced against ballot harvesting. Is that correct?
We did. We've tightened up the ballot harvesting, and we've put some limitations on it. I can't say it hasn't been enforced. I don't know that it's been violated, so
Well,
I'm not sure.
Some of us, Neil and myself and Mr. O'Connor, saw it violated.
Yeah.
We photographed it.
And were you arrested when you?
Wasn't me.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think we have a break coming up too, Uncle Ronnie.
Oh, wow. Well, there's one other thing here that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
There's I believe there's another case before the Supreme Court tomorrow, and that is, I believe it's voting in your precinct. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with that one.
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. I think we have two cases.
So what is that case? Can you go into a little bit more detail?
Essentially what it says is you have to vote in your precinct, and there are very few exceptions to that where you could early vote.
As opposed to voting centers like we've had.
Yes, no voting centers.
that's
You must vote in no emergency voting centers as well, and you have to vote where you're registered.
Well, I specifically liked what President Trump said at CPAC,
I do too.
where he said there should be a day of voting, not a week of voting, not a month of voting, not
Or a
45
season.
days or a season. It's a day of voting. So that's what I like.
And we've discussed that with John Brakey too.
Right.
And he's even to the point where it should be a holiday. Everybody has a day off so that you're in fact can't say, well, I didn't have the opportunity. I mean, the way the law reads now, I mean, you get 2 hours off with pay if you,
Right.
And I find it really difficult to believe that in a day you can't, especially with 2 hours off.
Especially if it's in, I mean, there were so many opportunities to vote at centers. I prefer precinct voting because you know the people there.
Yes.
They know you. They've seen it. They're the neighbors. You go to the same stores
And you're not
together.
about to put something over on many of these people. I mean,
Right,
you
and
can't
if you
walk
walk-
in and say, I'm Joe Blow, not Joe Smith.
Right, and if you walk in with a stack of 50 ballots, they're going to look at you and say, why do you have 50 ballots there?
Right.
You know? It's accountability.
Right, and we know beyond a shadow of doubt. I think you'll both agree. The best government, the most responsive government, is the one that's closest to the people. Is the best government you can have.
Yeah.
I would agree with that if the government is honest and functioning. if it's not, it actually can be it can be the most tyrannical government.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
It's becoming an oxymoron.
Yeah.
But if you have a government that is acting within the confines of the Constitution and acting within the confines of the best interest of the people, the local government is the best. But it can be the most tyrannical.
Yeah.
Like
that's why
you
limited
must wear
power.
a mask and you must close the schools.
Limited powers.
That kind of tyranny.
Well, and one of the reasons why is because there's less limitation at the state level than there is at the federal level. If you look at the federal Constitution, it is one of enumerated powers. Now, we don't follow that,
No.
but we're supposed to. And if we did, we wouldn't have probably 70% of the federal government that exists today. And at the state level, it is a much broader and open question as to what the states can do legitimately. It's certainly broader than the federal
Yes,
government.
absolutely.
And so that's where they can actually get in legally and legitimately. They can come in and regulate far greater than the federal government can legally.
Right. Any other questions that we have? Because we've got to move on. We're going to have to go to a break. We've got some people from the We the People Alliance, and this is really going to be exciting because we're going to be talking about recall. And a lot of us have heard about that. We don't know what, some people don't know what it is.
It was a movie
or
with
how it works.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Total Recall.
Total Recall.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Connor made a graphic of that, as a matter of fact, went out. So, any rate, let's shift gears here, and Mr. O'Connor will take us out, and Senator Farnsworth and Alex, thank you for being on the
Yes,
show.
thank you
for
so
having me
much.
on.
Always a
Thanks for having
pleasure.
us.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
It's always exciting. These guys are rock stars. Whenever we have them on, we get lots and lots of views, and so that's no exception. So, any rate, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back with our next guests. And so, don't you dare go away, because we've got a bodybuilder here in the building, and he's it looks like he could floor slam any one of us. So we'll see you on the other side. Don't go away.